This video is the first in what I hope will be a weekly series on my adventures in developing my mindfulness practice. At some point, I'll also explain the title behind the series, Understanding Mindfulness Practice for the Intuitively Autistic, but that's a bit of a long story. For the moment, I'll just focus on the fact that, like everything else in my life, it seems like the teaching around mindfulness is targeted at neurotypicals, leaving me to fill in the gaps to adapt it to an autistic brain like mine. So I've started these videos because for a while I've been thinking that I haven't been a particularly effective learner when it comes to my mindfulness practice. So I've tried telling myself to be a more effective learner, but it hasn't really worked. So what I know does help, though, is a bit of accountability, and that the simple act of telling someone else how your learning has been going and what you intend to do makes it more likely you'll follow through. In my case, I get a particularly hard stick of accountability by making these videos because I feel a strong obligation to be a role model of the claims I'm making about effective learning. So by making a video each week telling you how I've been learning about mindfulness the week before will sort of prompt me to learn in an effective way. So the thing I always advise if you want to become a more effective learner is to reflect on the question, why am I sometimes an effective learner and sometimes an ineffective learner? And in this case, I'm focusing solely on me learning mindfulness. So I've thought about this a bit, and what I came up with is that I think there are sort of 4 main states in which I might try to practice mindfulness. One of them is an out-of-control anxiety attack, and I'll leave that to a side because I really don't know how mindfulness fits in with that at all. Maybe it's more a prevention strategy than something you use during the attacks. Then there's when I experience what I'd call background anxiety. I can feel it there, but it's not out of control. Then there's a state where I get really run down, which is usually after I've experienced a lot of background anxiety or anxiety attacks for an extended period of time. I feel tired, I have brain fog, headaches, migraines, it's just a bit hard. And then there's a neutral state. So my experience of mindfulness practice has been that when I'm in the neutral state, I can quite intuitively and without much difficulty use mindfulness to get me into a state of joy and happiness. It's just so nice. I really like it. And yeah, it's awesome. However, I think this intuitive way that I've been able to experience joy and happiness when I'm starting from a neutral state has actually made it more difficult for me to practice mindfulness when I'm experiencing background anxiety or when I'm run down, because I just can't access that joyful state in the same way. It's almost like I'm constantly comparing myself to the experiences of joy and happiness, and I'm starting to think I can't do mindfulness when I'm in these states. I don't understand it well enough to do it. It's like I'm getting overwhelmed by how difficult it feels to access that state of joy and happiness when I'm in those other states, and so I give up before I've given it a decent shot. So my goal for myself is, instead of throwing up my hands, giving up and saying I just don't know enough about mindfulness to be able to use it when I'm in these states, to start thinking like an effective learner and just focus on what I do and don't understand, and being curious about the things that I don't understand. So here's one example of me trying to be an effective learner with regards to my recent mindfulness practice. I've been working on a second version of the Island of Listening video, and in that there's what I'm calling the Proclamation of Ruth. I've started to notice that saying this aloud has a powerful impact on my current state of mind, particularly the sections that I've bolded here. I am Ruth. I want to think like a Ruth, feel like a Ruth, live like a Ruth, be a Ruth. It seems that those words really seem to ground me and can take me away from some of my anxieties about what the outside world is thinking of me. So I've been experimenting with saying these words as part of my mindfulness practice. And one of the things I noticed is that when I was starting to feel a bit anxious, I could get up and walk around and recite them. And as I was doing that, I started to have this spontaneous visualization that I could see this kind of glowing light starting from sort of my gut tummy region that would sort of expand from there. Like the Ruthness of me was somehow represented by this light. So that was all very interesting. Then this morning it was decided that I would spend a bit of time lying down being still. And I thought that given I was experiencing feline paralysis for a while, this could be a good time to try some mindfulness practice. And so I was trying to do this same reciting of the proclamation to see what would happen. But I noticed something interesting. When I was visualizing myself with the glowing light expanding from my gut regions, I was standing up, whereas at the time I was lying down. As I tried to pay attention to my body, which was in the lying down position, I realized I couldn't visualize the glowing light in that position. It seemed to be very strongly associated with standing up. And I didn't know why. What was going on here? Then something even more bizarre happened. After I'd been trying to pay attention to my body in the lying down position, while also visualizing the glowing light, I suddenly got these images of, I'm pretty sure they were elephants. I don't know that. I just saw these images of cartoon elephants that were constantly resizing themselves. And it wasn't something that felt like something I was consciously visualizing or deliberately. It was pretty much out of my conscious control. And it's very hard to describe this because I was in an odd sort of mental state at the time. I had a sense that the elephants were deliberately trying to constantly resize themselves, almost as if they were drinking the drink me potion from Alice in Wonderland that made her suddenly grow very tall, large or very small. It's moments like these that really illustrate what I'm getting at when I say that mindfulness teaching is not targeted at autistic brains. When I've been in classes, there's been lots and lots of suggestions about how to adapt the practices if you experience back pain or other sorts of scenarios that are quite common for neurotypicals, but I'm yet to hear anything that covers cartoon elephants appearing when you try and visualize glowing lights. Now, my default assumption is that this is because it's an autism thing that neurotypicals don't experience, and so it's not covered. But part of me wonders if other people are experiencing it, and there's just not talking about the elephant in the meditation. It can be very hard to know with neurotypicals. So this leaves me in the position of trying to work out what's going on with these elephants and what, if anything, I should do in response. I think the Alice in Wonderland connection is a bit of a red herring. My cousin Claire told me that she and Cam were reading Alice in Wonderland, so I got out my copy and read a bit of that as well. And so I think the connection there was just because it was on my mind, because I'd thought about it recently. what I think is possibly going on is that there's an underlying brain circuitry that's responsible for visualization. And I have been trying to ask this circuitry to transform a visualization of me standing up with a glowing light to a visualization of me lying down with a glowing light. And my brain wasn't in a particularly good state. I feel like I was very susceptible to migraines and that sort of sense at the time, and it was just too hard. But it seemed I'd been asking it to do something. Maybe I'd been pushing the circuits. Somehow they had to fire to... I don't know much about neurons. I don't know if anyone does. But it felt like they were almost firing at random, and somehow that turned into resizing elephants. So instead of transforming an image of me standing up with a glowing light to me lying down with a glowing light, my brain came back and said, "Nah, I can't do that, but have some elephants." But the other thing I was thinking about is that I know that we're often being told in the meditation classes that the posture we choose is very important. So maybe this is actually nothing to do with autism, and the sort of meditation I was doing is better done standing up for everyone. I did try doing the visualization standing up shortly afterwards, and sure enough, I could visualize it no problems. So this afternoon, I decided to try the meditation again, this time in a standing up position. Attempt 1 didn't go quite according to plan, but after some, let's say, negotiation, I was able to restart the meditation in attempt 2. So this meditation started off a lot more promising. I was able to do the visualization. I was sort of alternating between that and focusing on my breath or different sensations in my body, like the feeling of my feet or the feeling of my clothing as it moved slightly over my skin and I was breathing, the feeling of my hands moving up and down in my pockets as I breathed. I could feel a change in the way I was breathing as the meditation progressed. So all the sorts of things that were interesting but were sort of expected. But then it got very odd. It was maybe, 10 minutes after. I don't know exactly, but I knew the whole period was about 20 minutes. That I started getting a very strong monotone ringing in my head. I have long felt that I have some sort of gunk built up in my head. I can feel a mild pressure sensation. I strongly associate this with being in the run-down, prone to migraine phase. But it started to get even stronger. I was feeling slightly woozy. There was a strong pressure build-up in my ears. And it just got to the point where it just felt really wrong to be standing up. So I just stopped the meditation and lay down on my bed. And probably during this period, the ringing sound changed in pitch. It became more of a hissing sound. And then slowly the pressure decreased, the sensation in my ears reduced. And after maybe 10-15 minutes, I felt like it was okay for me to get up again. And it did feel like this had achieved something, that maybe my brain was in a slightly better state than when I started the meditation. I don't know. It's possible I almost brought on a short migraine doing this. It's possible that I sort of put my brain into a deep cleaning state. I sort of err towards the latter, but for no reason other than that I want to trust my brain knows what it's doing. And I really think there's some gunk in there that needs to get cleaned out. So if that's, I guess I want to believe that that's what it was doing. Who knows? So, after this rather eventful day of meditation practices, I've got quite a few questions. Number one, what was going on during the standing up propulsion of Ruth meditation? Can I learn to do it lying down? If I wasn't in such a migraine-prone, for want of a better word, brain state, would it have been possible to do the visualization? And why is there a connection between type of practice and posture anyway? What's that to do with? And finally, what is a good being sat on by cat practice? Because I still do have a lot of time that I could be used for mindfulness practice when I'm being sat on.